You walk into a store and you tell the person who's in the store, let's say it's a Best Buy, you tell them what you're looking for. I'm looking for a television. And right off the bat, they start asking you questions. Are you looking for LCD? Are you looking for 3D? Are you looking for 4K? And what they're doing is they're asking you about the features of a product. Notice they rarely ask, at least not at Best Buy, they don't ask about you. They don't ask what you're going to do with it or how big the room is. Oh, some really good salespeople might ask that later, but at the end of the day, the standard for sales, at least in consumer electronics, for example, isn't very good. And so they punt straight to, okay, what are the features you're looking for? Let me point you in the right direction. But if you were to step into, and most people don't do that anymore, but if you were going to step into a car lot to buy a car, you notice that the sales education there is a little different. People start asking you, well, tell me about your family. How many of you would be driving? How big is family? What kind of car are you looking for? Can I show you some things? How often do you drive? What's your commute like? And they don't even ask it in this straightforward way. They literally tell me, what do you do for a living? And where are you at? And they're asking all this stuff because what they want to know is not just what you think you want. They want to know more about you. They want to understand your context. And it turns out that when it comes to sales, and particularly if we're talking about selling software, that is particularly helpful. Because once we understand, and we need to understand two things, once we understand the demographic data, are you young or are you older? Are you just getting started in your career, or do you have a lot more experience and maybe more disposable income? Do you have, is it just, are you just driving for yourself, or do you have a larger family that you're taking with you? Once we understand the demographic data, and then we understand the behavioral data, right? Behavioral data is one of those things that you don't experience immediately on a car lot. In fact, if you really want to get a better price, you visit the car lot, you interact with someone, and then you leave. And by leaving, well, a couple things have happened. First of all, you now have taken some of that person's time. That salesperson who was in a queue, right? And it was their turn to get the next lead. And then, of course, you walked up and they took you, and then you chatted for a while and you left, and they didn't close the deal. Now they got to get to the back of the line and wait for the next lead. But when you come back, you're connected to them, right? And so then every time you come back, you're building a little more rapport. You're also getting them to invest a little bit more, which helps if you're in a situation like not at CarMax, but in another dealership where you want both parties to be interested in closing a deal. That's different than demographics. That's the context of the interaction. The context, how often have you been there? How many times have you come back? Have you brought more people, right? You want to help it out? Keep coming back, keep leaving and coming back, and bring people with you. Right? And the more people you bring, the more people you're like, here, I want I want mom to get in the car, try out the minivan. I want grandma to get in the back seat. I want to bring the kids and get them in the third row. The more you do that, the more you're adding the contextual information that allows that salesperson to understand both demographics and context to help them determine how ready are you to make a purchase. Now, of course, if you go into a Best Buy, the experience isn't all that great. If you go to a car dealership, man, if you have the right dealership with the right personnel, it's fantastic. The wrong personnel are at the wrong dealership, and that experience can just feel pushy and frustrating. Yet what happens when we go to an online property? When we go to a website where we're looking to buy, and for the most part, we get the pop-up that just smacks us in the face, like, give me all your information right now. And then we get every button on the website is ready for the, let's do this deal right now. The reality of the situation is that most of us now spend a decent amount of time online, evaluating and collecting data before we ever get ready to make a decision, which means we're spending several interactions without making a purchase. It also means that when we configure websites to have that like buy it right now button, we're really only talking to one segment of our audience, one small portion. The people who, if we were to look at them in a continuum from -10, meaning they don't even know your product exists, to 0, they're ready to make a decision, to +10, they're telling the world about your product as an evangelist, right? If we look at people in that continuum, more often than not, most people design their website to add value from -1 to +1, which is really kind of sad if you think about it. Because in essence, it's a little bit like the Best Buy experience. You walk in the door and someone basically is like, look, I'm going to take you to where you need to go and I'm going to show you the one you ought to pick. And I just want you to buy. Like, that's a whole experience. I don't want to educate you. I don't want to give you data. I don't want to help you compare. I just want you to buy. Now, I'm giving Best Buy a bad rap. It turns out this happens at lots of places. But you don't want that. In fact, when I go in, we recently took the family to Paris and we knew we were going in the winter. And so we needed different kind of shoes than we normally wear here in San Diego. And so we went to a store where we knew they would have all-weather boots. But frankly, we never wear all-weather boots. We've never really worn all-weather boots. We didn't know anything about it. And we wanted to walk into a store where they would educate us, where they weren't presuming that, you know, at the end of the day, we're going to walk out with over $1,000 worth of shoes. No, instead, we just want to walk and browse. We want to understand. We want to look at the options. We want to try some things on. We want to talk and understand how far should we go. At one point, I picked a pair of boots that frankly looked like they were appropriate, only to discover they were like ready for the snow. And at the time, it wasn't snowing in Paris. It was overkill. And they backed me up from what I was looking at to the right boot. I wore those boots for 7 days in Paris, and I walked, on an average day here at the house, maybe I walk 1,000 steps a day. It's not a lot. In Paris, I was walking 14,000 steps a day. And I didn't have one problem with my footwear. These were UGG boots, and they were incredible. But the point isn't about the boots. The point is about the interaction I had with a person who was a salesperson, who wasn't really a salesperson. They were an education person. They were an advisor person. They were doing everything except pitching me on buy this right here, right now. And so to that end, not only did we buy stuff, we went back later to buy some more things as we got prepared for our trip. And why am I telling you all this? Because the old version of lead scoring, something I've embraced and loved for years, frankly never took off. Oh, it's out there. Tons of software, particularly in the enterprise space, tons of marketing automation solutions come with lead scoring. And many of these lead scoring solutions look at minimum, behavioral data, right? I don't know if you know much about lead scoring, but it's the notion that when you hit the website, let's say you're going to check out Eloqua because they're doing all sorts of marketing automation. So you go to the Eloqua website, and as you're there, you click on some pages. You think you're anonymous. That's cute. But as you're clicking through some pages, you finally get to this section where you're reading something and you want to read the case study. And so there's a little form and you fill it out. And now they know not only your browsing history, but they also know your name and your email. And you go, yeah, it's not that bad because I got this cool white paper. I read through it. Sometimes you have to give them your phone number, which means in about 10 seconds, your phone's going to ring. Hi there, Chris. I just wanted to make sure that you had no questions. I just downloaded the file. I haven't even read it yet. Right? But lead scoring was supposed to look at this notion of understanding where you were on the continuum so that our systems could help, in terms of the automation of marketing, help move you along your journey. And the way lead scoring was supposed to work, the original intent, right, was that we would define certain behavior and give it points. And this is where, almost every marketing department that looked at lead scoring said, this is fantastic. This is amazing. This is perfect. This is going to totally help our sales and marketing teams. But then someone had to decide, what is an event worthy of points? And then, how many points should I allocate? Like, in the big scheme of things, if someone comes to the website, if someone comes to my homepage, is that worth 1 point or 5 points or 10 points? If someone comes to my homepage and then goes to one of my case studies and downloads a white paper, is that download worth 5 points or 10 points or 20 points? And this is where it gets a little crazy, because most people just stopped right there, just started scratching their heads and were like, I don't really know. And so the software has the features, the company never used it. But when people started using it, what happened was that someone went in and said, okay, I'm going to say visiting the homepage and any product page is worth 1 point. Visiting the pricing page is worth 2 points. Downloading this thing is worth 5 points. Filling out this other form over here and checking this box that says you're going to make a buying decision within the next 6 months is worth 10 points. And checking the box that says, contact me now, I'd like to make a purchase, is worth 25 points. And you're like, that guy is hot. We're going to follow up with that person and we're ready to close a deal. I'm making this, let's just assume that was the layout. So you think, okay, great, no problem. Except the person goes and is desperately looking for your pricing page and can't find it. So they hit the homepage and then they go click on something else, and then they end up clicking and going back to the homepage, and then they click on something else, and then they click back and they go back to the homepage, and they keep hitting your homepage, and eventually they hit your pricing page, and all of a sudden they got 15 points because they've just been doing this all day long, or they did it over 2 or 3 days, and the lead goes from marketing to sales. Sales calls you up and says, "Hey, wow, 15 points! You must be super ready and engaged," and you're like, "No, I just couldn't find something on your website." Of course, I'm telling you the worst of all possible cases, but it does happen. So you say, well, if lead scoring showed so much promise and yet hasn't worked, what's the real answer? And the answer is predictive lead scoring. Oh, it's the same kind of lead scoring that we've been talking about. It not only monitors the behavioral dynamics, it looks at demographic data. So what you fill in your form, are you a C-level or a VP level person? So that's going to wait for something different than if you're just an influencer, though there's no just about being an influencer. But it'll look at demographic data, it'll look at behavioral data. But more important than that, given over the last several years, the introduction of big data and the solutions around big data, the software can actually look at the people who have purchased and look at their interactions and behavior and determine dynamically the algorithms that suggest the weighting factors for what's a leading indicator that someone has interest in you, what's a leading indicator that someone is approaching a purchase decision. And if that changes over time, the algorithm changes over time. And that's a lot better than a static algorithm that says, I decided in March of 2013 that visiting my website was worth 1 point, and buying my ebook was worth 5 points, and getting a hold of me for a one-on-one call and consulting was worth 100 points, and coming to my event was worth 150 points. Even though that may have worked at one point, what happens when the algorithms adjust? What happens when behavior shifts? Wouldn't you want something that is more predictive? Wouldn't you want something that takes some of that calculation out of your hands? And the good news is these players are starting to show up. And if they're starting to show up, it means at some point it'll be available for you and me. So keep your eye out for predictive lead scoring.